Somewhere in your closet, or a box in the garage, there's a jacket. Maybe it's leather, maybe denim, definitely covered in patches or pins or paint that meant something specific to you once and would take you 20 minutes to fully explain now. Your kids have probably seen it. Maybe they tried it on as a joke. Maybe they asked, "Who wore this?" like it belonged to someone else. And you said something like, "Oh, that was a long time ago," and changed the subject. Here's the thing, though. It wasn't a long time ago, not in the way that matters, because the kid who wore that jacket, the one who stood in the back of a venue with 60 other people who all knew every word, the one who got told by every adult in his life that this music and this attitude was going to ruin him, that kid didn't go anywhere. He's just quieter now. And nobody ever told him what he actually built. That's what this video is about. Not the music. Not really. This is about what happened to the part of you that decided, somewhere around 15 or 16, that the world being sold to you wasn't the real one, and what that decision turned into 40 years later. Because here's the strange part. The thing that got you written off back then is the exact thing that makes you one of the steadiest people in any room you walk into now. And almost nobody, including you probably, ever connected those two dots. To understand why this happened, you have to remember what the world actually looked like when you were the right age to notice it. Britain in the mid-70s had unemployment numbers nobody alive had seen before. Industries were closing. The people in charge had essentially stopped pretending they had a plan for you. In America, it looked different, but landed the same. Vietnam and Watergate had already done their work on anyone's trust in institutions. The decade before yours had tried optimism, and optimism had curdled into something nobody wanted to name out loud. You were a teenager, standing in the wreckage of a promise that had been broken before you were even old enough to vote on it. And then a sound showed up that matched the situation exactly. Not loud for the sake of loud. Loud because the volume finally matched what was true. 4 chords, 2 minutes, no solos, no spectacle, nothing extra. Because the people making this music weren't trying to impress anyone. They were done performing enthusiasm for a world that hadn't earned it. That's not rebellion for its own sake. The anger was specific, aimed at institutions, at the gap between what you were promised and what actually showed up. And specific anger is a very different thing from random anger. One is a tantrum. The other is a diagnosis. And here's where it gets interesting. Because the people studying this generation decades later found something almost nobody expected. And it had nothing to do with how dangerous the music was supposed to be. In 1991, a study published in the Journal of Broadcasting and Electronic Media looked at the personality profiles of punk fans specifically. What they found was lower acceptance of authority than almost any other group studied, stronger anti-authority behavior, a value system built around non-compliance. And here's the key part, as a stable adult orientation, not a phase, not something you'd grow out of, a permanent setting. The same research found something else, something quieter. They called it private collective self-esteem, meaning the sense of belonging to something real didn't need to be shown to anyone. You knew you were part of it. That was enough. You didn't need the world's approval of the thing to know the thing was real. Think about what that actually means for a person, long term. Most identity in this culture works through display. You belong to something, so you show it. You feel something, so you announce it. You were trained the opposite way, twice over. First, by a childhood where nobody was watching closely enough for display to matter. Then by a subculture that taught you the realest things don't need an audience to be true. That's not a small thing. That's the foundation of a person who doesn't need to be seen doing the right thing in order to do it. But there's a second piece to this, and it's about what that anger was actually for. Because the music wasn't just a soundtrack to how you felt. It was doing something to you. And the men doing best right now are usually the ones who never stopped letting it do that job. Here's something researchers at the University of Queensland found when they studied people who regularly listened to extreme music. They took a group of regular listeners and deliberately made them angry, had them spend 16 minutes talking about things in their lives that genuinely frustrated them. Work, money, relationships, all of it. Then half the group listened to music from their own collection. The other half sat in silence. The expectation, based on decades of official panic about this kind of music, was that the music group would get angrier, more worked up, more volatile. That's not what happened. Both groups calmed down at similar rates. But the music group got something the silence group didn't. They reported feeling more active, more alive, more like themselves again. The anger had somewhere to go. It went into the music, and it came back out as something usable, instead of something that just sat there, building pressure. Here's why that matters for you specifically, 40 years later. A man who spent his teenage years processing anger through something physical and private, turning it up loud, alone, until it moved through him, learned a skill most people never get handed. He learned that difficult feelings don't have to become someone else's problem. That's not nothing. That's actually one of the rarer traits in a grown man. The people around you, your wife, your kids, your friends, have probably never had to manage your bad days. Not because you don't have them, because you learned a long time ago, alone in a room, with the volume up, what to do with them before they reached anyone else. And that's where this all starts to add up to something. Because everything we've just talked about, the refusal, the private identity, the anger that never became someone else's burden, all of it points toward the same place. Here's the man you actually are now, if any of this sounds familiar. You don't take things at face value. Somebody tells you this is just how it's done, and something in you automatically checks that. Not out of cynicism, out of the habit of a person who learned early that the official version and the real version are often two different things, and the gap between them is worth noticing. You don't need credit for the things you do right. You show up, you do the work, you keep your word. And if nobody mentions it, that's fine. Because you were never doing it for the mention. That's private collective self-esteem, 40 years on. You know what you are. The room doesn't need to confirm it. And you don't bring your bad days to other people because you've had decades of practice putting them somewhere else first. A garage, a long drive, a record turned up loud enough that the neighbors, if you had close enough neighbors, would have something to say about it. People talk about reliability like it's about showing up on time and keeping promises. True, but that's the surface of it. The deeper version is this. A reliable man is one whose presence doesn't come with hidden costs. Being around him doesn't mean managing him. What you got from Punk, underneath the noise and the politics and everything else, was a complete education in not needing anyone to manage you. Nobody noticed this happening. Not the teachers who wrote you off, not the parents who worried, not even you probably, because it happened slowly and quietly over 4 decades, and there was no ceremony attached to it, but it happened. The kid in the back of the venue who didn't need the band to look at him to know the show mattered, that's the same man who doesn't need anyone to notice he's the one holding things together. He just is. He always was. You were never the danger they said you were. You were just early, figuring out, before almost anyone else your age, which things deserved your trust and which didn't. And 40 years later, that's still the thing people can count on you for, even if they never quite know why. If this is you, if there's a jacket somewhere with your name basically written into the wear pattern, I hope this gave you a way to look at it that you hadn't had before. Subscribe if you want more of this. This channel exists to look honestly at what's actually going on with men at this stage of life. Not the version everyone assumes, the real one. And if you haven't watched the last video yet, go back and watch it. It's about the men who quietly stopped returning certain calls somewhere in their 40s or 50s, and what that actually was, underneath how it looked from the outside. It connects to this one more than you'd expect. Same instinct, different decade. Thanks for watching. The jacket's still in the closet. You know exactly where it is. It's fine where it is. You don't need to wear it. You already are it.